The morning routine at Westlake Correctional never varied. I arrived precisely at 5:30 a.m. before the inmates began their day. The facility housed 342 men serving sentences ranging from 5 years to life. For 15 years as warden, I had established a reputation built on fairness and consistency. The guards respected me. The inmates knew the boundaries. Even the most hardened criminals understood that in my prison, rules existed for reasons beyond mere control. They provided structure, safety, and the foundation for rehabilitation for those who sought it. I walked the main corridor every morning, nodding to the guards who stood at attention. Johnson at the security desk gave his usual salute. Rivera was checking cells in Block C. The prisoners mostly stayed quiet as I passed. Some nodded respectfully. A few turned away. My position demanded distance, but I knew every name, every case file, every reason they had ended up in my care. When I reached my office, the day's reports waited on my desk, meticulously organized by my assistant. My home life provided the counterbalance to the institutional precision of my professional world. My daughter Sophia was 17, brilliant and determined. Her mother had passed when she was just 7, making our bond especially close. That morning, I had left her practicing her freestyle technique in our living room, mimicking the arm movements while balancing on one foot. Harvard and Stanford had already expressed interest in her swimming abilities. Scholarship opportunities seemed increasingly likely. Our house sat on Magnolia Street in Pine Ridge Estates, a planned community with manicured lawns and coordinated mailboxes. We had moved there 5 years earlier, attracted by the good schools and community pool where Sophia could train. The neighborhood had seemed perfect: quiet streets, friendly neighbors, and well-maintained properties. The homeowners association was mentioned during purchase, but it appeared to be a standard arrangement handling community spaces and seasonal decorations. The first notice appeared 3 months after moving in. A yellow slip of paper tucked into our door frame cited grass exceeding the regulation height by approximately 1 inch. I trimmed it the next day. Then came notices about our trash bins being visible from the street for more than 4 hours after collection. The mailbox needed repainting despite looking perfectly fine. Each infraction came with increasingly formal language about compliance and community standards. Sophia noticed the changes before I registered their significance. "Dad, have you seen those guys driving around taking pictures of houses?" she asked one evening while completing calculus homework at the kitchen table. "They have these clipboards and they stop in front of different houses every day. It is kind of creepy." I had noticed the increased presence: men and women in khaki pants and polo shirts with some kind of patch on the breast pocket. They drove slowly through the neighborhood in personal vehicles sporting magnetic decals on the doors. At first, I had assumed they were part of the expected HOA monitoring, but something about their demeanor seemed excessive, even to someone accustomed to institutional oversight. "Just ignore them," I told her, helping her with a difficult equation. "HOAs can get overzealous sometimes. As long as we follow the reasonable rules, we should be fine." Sophia shook her head, her competitive swimmer's instincts detecting something I had missed. "I do not think this is normal, Dad. The Wilsons got fined $500 because their holiday lights stayed up 3 days past the deadline. Mrs. Chen told me they threatened to put a lien on her house because her garden gnome exceeded the permitted lawn ornament height by 2 inches. Who even measures garden gnomes?" I smiled at her indignation, but something in her observation troubled me. In my profession, I had learned that authority required clear boundaries and transparent enforcement. Whatever was happening in Pine Ridge Estates seemed to be drifting beyond normal community standards into something else entirely. Something that, in my professional experience, often preceded trouble. "Maybe I should attend the next HOA meeting," I conceded. not yet understanding that the collision between my professional world of legitimate authority and their manufactured power was already set in motion. By the time I recognized the danger, it would be too late. The HOA notices increased in both frequency and severity over the next 3 months. What began as petty citations evolved into formal warnings, each printed on increasingly official-looking letterhead. The language shifted from requests to demands, from suggestions to threats. Our side gate was the wrong shade of white. Our mailbox numbers used an unapproved font. The American flag we displayed needed special approval for the bracket mounting it to the house. Each violation carried escalating fines that seemed deliberately designed to provoke rather than correct. I attempted to address the issues through proper channels, sending emails that went unanswered and leaving voicemails that were never returned. When I finally managed to speak with someone from the HOA office, the conversation was brief and unproductive. "Mr. Reynolds, we have a documented pattern of non-compliance from your property," the woman stated coldly. "The board has authorized escalation to level 3 enforcement if immediate corrections are not made." "What exactly is level 3 enforcement?" I asked, my warden's instinct for procedural clarity kicking in. "Continuous monitoring and direct intervention," she replied without elaboration before ending the call. That weekend brought my first encounter with Gerald Harmon, the HOA president. He stood on my front lawn wearing a uniform that resembled police tactical gear, complete with a utility belt holding a flashlight, radio, and what appeared to be pepper spray. The outfit featured patches and insignia mimicking law enforcement, though with Pine Ridge Estate Security Division, embroidered where a police department name would normally appear. "Warden Reynolds," he said, using my professional title with a slight sneer. "We have concerns about ongoing compliance issues with your property." His appearance struck me as deeply inappropriate, a costume rather than a uniform. In my 2 decades of corrections work, I had encountered many individuals with authority complexes, people who crave the power that comes with a badge. Gerald Harmon displayed all the classic signs. "Mr. Harmon, I would appreciate if we could discuss any concerns through proper channels," I responded calmly. "And I would suggest that your current attire closely resembles law enforcement uniforms in a way that could potentially confuse residents." His face flushed with anger. "We are authorized to maintain community standards through any means necessary according to Covenant Section 47.3. You of all people should understand the importance of maintaining order." As weeks passed, the HOA officers became a constant presence in the neighborhood. They drove vehicles with increasingly official-looking graphics, SUVs with spotlight attachments and door emblems that featured a shield remarkably similar to actual police insignia. Neighbors began avoiding eye contact during encounters, hurrying inside their homes when the patrols passed. At the community mailbox, Mrs. Patel whispered to me, "They fined us $2,000 for having non-approved window treatments." My husband wanted to fight it, but after they started parking outside our house all night shining spotlights in our windows, we just paid. Similar stories emerged throughout the neighborhood. The Johnsons received daily citations after questioning a fine. The elderly Mr. Winters found himself unable to access the community center after disputing an assessment for sidewalk repairs he had never requested. The situation became personal when Sophia reported being followed during her training runs through the neighborhood. "They take pictures of me, Dad," she said, her voice uncharacteristically small. "They stand there writing notes whenever I do anything outside." The final escalation came when Sophia attempted to access the community pool for her daily training session. Despite our dues being fully paid, her key card was denied. "Sorry, but your family's pool privileges have been suspended pending resolution of outstanding violations," said the attendant, a young man wearing the same quasi-police uniform as the others. "I have to train," Sophia protested. "I have qualifiers in 3 weeks." "Should have thought about that before your father decided to ignore community standards," he replied with obvious satisfaction. That night, I watched Sophia perform dry land exercises in our living room, her frustration evident in every movement. The line between petty harassment and something more sinister had been crossed. As both a parent and a professional who understood the dangers of unchecked authority, I knew we had reached a breaking point. What I did not yet realize was how literal that breaking point would soon become. The email arrived at 6:15 a.m. on a Tuesday. Coach Daniels from Stanford University's swimming program had reviewed Sophia's qualifying times and was expressing formal interest in offering her a scholarship opportunity. The coach emphasized that maintaining her training schedule and improving her times by even 2 seconds would virtually guarantee her position on their team. Sophia read the email 3 times, her hands trembling with excitement. "Dad, this is everything I have worked for," she whispered, her eyes bright with tears. 4 more weeks of solid training, and I could have a full ride to Stanford." I hugged her tightly, feeling the lean muscle she had developed through years of 5 a.m. practices and endless laps. "I am so proud of you, sweetheart. We will make sure you get your training time, no matter what." We celebrated with a special breakfast. Sophia was too excited to eat much, already mentally calculating training schedules and target times. She needed to leave for the public pool across town by 7:30 a.m. to get her morning session in before school. The community pool was closer but remained off-limits due to the HOA's punitive measures. "I will be ready in 20 minutes, she called, heading upstairs to change into her practice suit. I remained at the kitchen table, reviewing work documents and finishing my coffee. The sound of vehicles pulling into our driveway drew my attention. Through the front window, I saw 2 black SUVs with the Pine Ridge Estate's shield emblems blocking our driveway. 4 men in the now familiar tactical style uniforms emerged, each carrying clipboards and wearing utility belts. I recognized Gerald Harmon among them, speaking into a handheld radio with exaggerated official gestures. I was about to go outside to address the situation when Sophia came bounding down the stairs, swim bag over her shoulder, hair tucked under her practice cap. "I will see you tonight, Dad. Wish me luck on those times," she called, heading for the front door before I could warn her. She stepped onto the porch just as the 4 men approached. From the kitchen, I heard Gerald Harmon's voice, officious and loud. "This property is under direct monitoring for multiple covenant violations. No one is permitted to leave until our inspection is complete." "What? I have to get to practice," Sophia responded, confusion evident in her voice. I moved quickly toward the front door, hearing the confrontation escalate. "Step back inside the house now," one of the men ordered. "No, I am late already. Please move your cars," Sophia replied, her competitive determination showing through. When I reached the front door, the situation was already deteriorating rapidly. 2 men blocked Sophia's path down the porch steps. Gerald Harmon stood with his hand raised in a stopping gesture reminiscent of traffic police. The 4th man was photographing our house and documenting something on his clipboard. "What is going on here?" I demanded, my warden's voice cutting through the tension. Gerald Harmon turned to me with obvious satisfaction. "Warden Reynolds, your property has been placed under direct enforcement protocol. No residents may enter or leave until our compliance inspection is complete. You have absolutely no legal authority to detain anyone, I stated firmly. Move your vehicles and let my daughter go to her practice. We have every authority granted by the covenant you signed, he countered, producing a document from his pocket. Section 52.7 permits direct intervention for Level 3 violations. Sophia attempted to step around the men blocking her path. Dad, I really need to go. Coach Miller is waiting. What happened next occurred with shocking speed. As Sophia moved toward the steps, one of the men grabbed her arm. Another moved to block her descent. She pulled away instinctively, the sudden movement throwing her off balance on the elevated porch. The man still holding her arm jerked backward as she tried to break free. The sound will haunt me forever. Sophia's body twisting unnaturally as she fell from the porch. The dull thud as she hit the concrete walkway below. The sharp crack that followed, a sound no parent should ever have to hear. Then the silence, more terrifying than any scream could have been. I shoved past the men, jumping the entire porch to reach her. She lay unnaturally still, her practice cap askew, eyes wide with shock rather than pain. The shock was worse. It meant her body could not yet process what had happened. Call an ambulance, I shouted, not daring to move her. Now. The men stood frozen, their play-acting authority suddenly confronted with real consequences. Gerald Harmon backed away, already crafting the narrative I could see forming in his eyes. She was resisting compliance protocols, he muttered to one of his associates. Document everything. The ambulance arrived in minutes that stretched like hours. The paramedics worked with quick efficiency, stabilizing Sophia's neck and back before carefully transferring her to a backboard. One of them pulled me aside as they prepared to transport her. Sir, I need to be straight with you. There appears to be significant spinal trauma. The doctor will need to assess the full extent, but you should prepare yourself. The emergency room was a blur of forms, questions, and medical terminology. MRI, compression fracture, vertebral displacement, cord compression. When the neurologist finally approached me in the waiting room, his expression confirmed my worst fears. Mr. Reynolds, your daughter has sustained severe trauma to her thoracic and lumbar vertebrae. We need to operate immediately to relieve pressure on the spinal cord and stabilize the fractures. I must be honest with you. There is significant damage. Recovery will be extensive, and we cannot yet determine if she will regain full function. The words landed like physical blows. I thought of the Stanford email from just hours earlier. The years of 5 a.m. practices. The dreams she had built stroke by stroke through chlorinated water. All potentially washed away because men playing dress-up could not distinguish between real authority and their pathetic power fantasy. As they wheeled Sophia towards surgery, she regained consciousness briefly. Through pain, medication, and shock, she gripped my hand with surprising strength. Dad, she whispered, my time's Stanford. I held her hand until the orderlies insisted I could go no further. Standing in the sterile hospital hallway, I felt something break inside me as well, the careful professional distance I had maintained throughout my career. The warden's detachment crumbled, replaced by something primal and focused. In its place stood a father with a very particular set of skills, knowledge, and connections. A father who now had only one objective: justice. The hospital waiting room became my temporary command center while Sophia underwent her first surgery. 11 hours of surgical intervention to stabilize her spine, insert titanium rods, and assess nerve damage. While medical professionals fought to repair what had been broken, I began constructing the case that would lead to justice. I called Police Chief Martinez, a professional contact I had worked with on inmate transfers for over a decade. "Jim, I need a favor that goes beyond professional courtesy," I explained after outlining the situation. His response was immediate and unequivocal. "Jesus, Michael, I will have detectives at the hospital within the hour. This is assault, possibly aggravated battery. These guys have been playing cop all over town, and we have had complaints but nothing this serious." The detectives arrived as promised, taking initial statements and photographs of Sophia's injuries. They seemed particularly interested in the quasi-official uniforms and vehicles the HOA representatives had been using. One detective recognized Gerald Harmon's name immediately. "We have a history with that guy," Detective Wilson explained. "Failed the psychological evaluation for police academy twice. Got fired from mall security for exceeding his authority with shoppers. He has been dancing on the edge of impersonating an officer for years." Over the next 3 days, while Sophia stabilized in post-operative care, I activated every professional contact I had developed over 20 years in corrections. Judge Carlton authorized search warrants despite his vacation when he heard the circumstances. District Attorney Hoffman assigned her best prosecutor to begin building a case. My colleague at the state licensing board pulled records on every known HOA board member. What emerged was far more disturbing than simple HOA overreach. Gerald Harmon had 3 prior arrests for impersonating government officials in 2 different states. He had changed his name twice before settling in our community. His second-in-command, Louis Mercer, had served time for fraud and extortion in Nevada. 3 other board members had similar histories of financial crimes or authority abuse. The search warrants revealed an operation that defied belief. The HOA office contained surveillance equipment monitoring select homes throughout the neighborhood. Computer files documented a systematic campaign of harassment against residents who questioned authority or represented perceived threats. Financial records showed nearly $2 million in collected fines, funneled through various accounts before disappearing offshore. Most disturbing was the discovery of a specific file labeled Reynolds Management. Inside were photographs of our home taken at all hours, records of my work schedule, and detailed notes about Sophia's swimming accomplishments. One email exchange between board members stated explicitly, "The warden needs special attention. His presence undermines our authority in the community." They had targeted my daughter not randomly, but specifically because of my profession. Her injury was the culmination of a deliberate intimidation campaign against someone they viewed as a competing authority figure. Detective Wilson brought me additional files recovered during digital forensics. "You need to see this," he said grimly. "They had surveillance cameras directed at your property. They were monitoring your movements, documenting routines, tracking patterns." The evidence painted a picture of an elaborate criminal enterprise masquerading as neighborhood governance. They had systematically identified residents with assets, created fabricated violations, and escalated harassment until people paid simply to end the torment. Those who resisted faced increasingly aggressive tactics, surveillance, property damage made to look accidental, and coordinated social isolation. "How did no one stop this sooner?" I asked the detective. "Fear and isolation," he replied. "They targeted one household at a time, made examples of anyone who resisted. Classic intimidation tactics. Each victim thought they were alone until it was too late." On the 4th day, while examining financial records with the forensic accountant, I received the call from Sophia's neurologist. The news was mixed. The surgery had successfully stabilized her spine and prevented further nerve damage. However, she had lost significant function in her lower extremities. Months of rehabilitation lay ahead, with uncertain prospects for recovery. Her swimming career, the foundation of her identity and future plans, was effectively over. That evening, I sat beside her hospital bed as she slept, the steady rhythm of monitors tracking her vital signs. The professional detachment that had served me throughout my career returned, but transformed. The cold analytical skills I had applied to prison administration now became laser-focused on ensuring justice. Not vengeance, justice. The distinction was important to me, a line I had maintained throughout my professional life. I opened my laptop and began organizing the evidence into categories: criminal impersonation, fraud, extortion, assault, conspiracy. My corrections experience had taught me precisely which charges carried the most severe penalties, which judges were least sympathetic to abuse of authority, and exactly how the system processed those who preyed on the vulnerable. By morning, I had compiled a comprehensive case file that would ensure maximum charges and, if successful, maximum sentences. As Sophia stirred awake, asking immediately about her recovery timeline, I made her a promise I intended to keep. "Focus on healing, sweetheart. I am taking care of everything else." My living room transformed into an evidence processing center over the following weeks. The dining table disappeared beneath stacks of documents, financial records, and witness statements. The walls featured timeline charts and connection diagrams linking HOA board members to specific criminal activities. District Attorney Hoffman assigned 2 prosecutors to work directly with me, recognizing both the case's complexity and its personal significance. "The charges are substantial," Julia Hoffman explained during one of our strategy sessions. "Criminal impersonation of law enforcement, assault causing grievous bodily harm, fraud, extortion, racketeering under organized crime statutes. Given the systematic nature and extensive documentation, we are looking at potential sentences of 20+ years for the primary perpetrators." While we built the legal case, Sophia fought her own battle at the rehabilitation center. 3 days each week, I watched her endure physical therapy sessions that left her exhausted and tearful. Titanium rods now supported her damaged spine, but the nerve damage created unpredictable responses in her lower limbs. Some days brought encouraging progress, toe movements, increased sensation. Other days brought setbacks and the crushing weight of her new reality. "Dad, Stanford rescinded the scholarship offer," she told me during one particularly difficult evening, holding the formal letter in trembling hands. "They said they hope for my recovery, but cannot hold the position given the medical prognosis." I sat beside her hospital bed, holding her hand as she processed yet another loss. "We will find new paths forward," I promised. "Different scholarships, different opportunities." "I do not know who I am if I am not a swimmer," she whispered. The HOA continued its campaign against other homeowners, seemingly emboldened by their apparent victory over my family. With Sophia hospitalized and me preoccupied with her care and the investigation, they likely assumed we had been sufficiently intimidated. Their miscalculation would prove catastrophic to their operation. Each new action they took against neighbors strengthened our case. Mrs. Chen received threats of property liens for refusing to pay fabricated fines. The Williams family found their key cards deactivated across all community amenities after questioning an assessment. Elderly residents reported intimidating late-night inspections by uniformed HOA representatives. These fresh incidents provided new witnesses willing to testify. People who had remained silent out of fear began coming forward, first in whispers, then in formal statements. The case expanded from dozens of victims to hundreds, painting a picture of systemic abuse spanning years. "We have enough for grand jury indictments," Prosecutor Chen informed me 6 weeks after the incident. But getting cooperation from some key witnesses remains challenging. The fear is deeply ingrained. I suggested a community meeting held off-site, away from potential HOA surveillance. The local high school opened their auditorium for an evening session presented as a neighborhood watch meeting. Nearly 200 residents attended, many visibly nervous about potential repercussions. I stood before them not as a warden but as a father and neighbor. My daughter's spine was broken because these individuals believed themselves above the law, I told the silent crowd. Her competitive swimming career is over. Her scholarship opportunities vanished. But she fights every day to recover, and her courage inspires me to ensure no other family suffers as ours has. The testimony that followed lasted for hours. Elderly residents described being bullied into paying thousands in fraudulent fines. Young families detailed surveillance and intimidation. Former HOA employees shared internal practices designed to target and exploit vulnerable homeowners. Throughout this period, I maintained my duties at the correctional facility, though with modified hours to accommodate Sophia's care. The dual roles, warden by day, case builder by night, created a unique perspective that informed my approach to justice. I understood precisely how the correctional system processed new inmates, the assessment protocols that determined housing assignments, the factors that influenced daily life behind bars. This knowledge became particularly relevant during a late-night strategy session with DA Hoffman. "We need to discuss sentencing recommendations and placement," she noted. "Given your position, there are potential conflict of interest concerns." I nodded, having anticipated this conversation. "I have already spoken with the Department of Corrections Ethics Committee. They agree that while I cannot be directly involved in custody decisions for these specific defendants, there is no inherent conflict in their placement at Westlake Correctional if determined appropriate through standard protocols." The DA raised an eyebrow. "And would Westlake be considered appropriate through standard protocols?" "Westlake is the primary intake facility for all felony sentences exceeding 10 years in this jurisdiction," I replied evenly. "It would be the standard assignment for crimes of this nature and sentence length." We both understood the implications. The men who had shattered my daughter's future would likely serve their sentences in my facility, under my ultimate authority, not through manipulation or improper influence, but through the natural operation of the system they had shown such contempt for. As the case solidified and indictments appeared imminent, I spent an evening with Sophia reviewing her updated medical prognosis. Her doctors now predicted partial recovery of function with intensive rehabilitation, but competitive swimming remained permanently out of reach. "I have been thinking about studying law," she told me, surprising me with her characteristic resilience. "This whole experience, I want to help people who face abuses of power." I felt a surge of pride mixed with sadness for the path that had brought her to this realization. "You would make an extraordinary advocate." That night, reviewing the final prosecution strategy with my dining room task force, I felt the pieces lock into place. The case was airtight, the witnesses prepared, the evidence overwhelming. Justice, with its deliberate pace and methodical processes, was finally ready to move forward. The operation began at 5:00 a.m. on a Tuesday, deliberately timed to mirror the early morning raids familiar to law enforcement but completely unexpected by civilians. I watched from a police department operations center as the synchronized takedown unfolded on multiple video feeds. 23 separate warrants were being executed simultaneously across our community and beyond. The primary target, Gerald Harmon, received the full tactical team treatment. Officers in actual law enforcement uniforms, not costumes, surrounded his residence before dawn. The irony was not lost on anyone in the command center as real police announced their presence with proper authority and documentation. Live feeds showed Harmon emerging from his front door in paisley bathrobe and slippers, his face slack with disbelief as officers secured him. The theatrical authority he had cultivated collapsed instantly when confronted with authentic law enforcement power. No swagger, no commanding presence, just a middle-aged man with fear in his eyes being read his Miranda rights on his own doorstep. Similar scenes played out across the neighborhood. Louis Mercer attempted to flee through a back window, but was quickly apprehended in his neighbor's azalea bushes. The HOA treasurer surrendered without resistance, already asking about cooperation agreements before he reached the patrol car. The board secretary began crying immediately, claiming she was just following orders, a defense I had heard countless times throughout my corrections career. The search teams discovered evidence exceeding even our substantial expectations. A hidden room in the HOA office contained dozens of counterfeit badges and credentials. Computer servers held surveillance footage from throughout the neighborhood, including recordings from hidden cameras placed on private property without knowledge or consent. Financial records documented over $4 million in fraudulent fines and assessments, twice what our investigation had initially uncovered. Most disturbing were the strategic plans found in Harmon's home office. Detailed dossiers existed for problem residents, with specific tactics for harassment and intimidation. My family's file was among the thickest, with notations specifically referencing my position as warden and identifying it as authority competition requiring special handling. I visited Sophia at the rehabilitation center that afternoon, finding her watching news coverage of the arrests on the television mounted in her room. Local stations were covering the operation extensively, with helicopter footage showing officers loading boxes of evidence into vans. The reporter used terms like criminal enterprise, racketeering, and systematic fraud to describe the HOA leadership. "They really did this to everyone, not just us," Sophia observed quietly. "Yes, but they will not do it to anyone else," I replied. Her physical therapist arrived for the afternoon session, interrupting our conversation. Sophia had progressed to assisted standing exercises, a significant achievement given her injuries. I watched her face, determination mixed with pain, as she gripped the parallel bars and attempted to shift weight onto her legs. 6 weeks of intensive therapy had produced incremental improvements, each small victory celebrated like a championship win. From the rehabilitation center, I drove directly to the county processing center, where the HOA defendants were being processed into the system. My position gave me legitimate access to observe intake procedures, though I maintained appropriate professional distance from the specific processing of these defendants. They did not see me watching from the administrative area as they moved through the intake system. The removal of personal effects, the institutional clothing exchange, the loss of individual identity as they transformed into inmates with identification numbers rather than names. These were procedures I had supervised for years, necessary security protocols for managing a correctional population. Now they processed the men who had broken my daughter's body and future. I took no personal satisfaction from their discomfort, their fear, their humiliation. This was not about revenge. It was about appropriate consequences for actions freely chosen, about restoration of proper authority, about protecting a community from those who would exploit and harm its members. The initial court appearances occurred the following morning. I sat silently in the back of the courtroom as each defendant was brought before Judge Carlton. The prosecutor presented evidence of flight risk, community danger, and the severity of charges to argue against bail. Gerald Harmon's attorney attempted to portray him as a misguided community volunteer who had overstepped boundaries with good intentions. Judge Carlton was unmoved. The evidence suggests a sophisticated criminal enterprise operating under the guise of neighborhood governance, he stated firmly. The court finds the defendants represent an extraordinary risk to the community through intimidation of witnesses and victims. Bail is denied for all primary defendants. The case will proceed to grand jury indictment. I visited Sophia that evening, finding her attempting homework from her hospital bed. Her school had arranged remote learning during her recovery, determined to keep her on track for graduation despite her extended absence. The news said they will stay in jail until the trial, she commented without looking up from her calculus textbook. The judge found them to be flight risks and dangers to the community, I confirmed. She nodded, then set aside her homework. For the first time since the injury, I saw a small smile touch her lips. Good. I do not want other kids to go through this. That night, I reviewed the correctional intake reports showing the housing assignments for the new detainees. All standard protocol, all by the book, all eventually leading to where the system would naturally place them for their classification level and security needs. The system I had dedicated my career to maintaining would now hold them accountable in ways their counterfeit authority never prepared them for. The trial lasted 7 weeks. Evidence mounted day after day, testimony upon testimony building an overwhelming case. Former HOA employees revealed the systematic nature of the fraud. Financial experts traced millions in stolen funds. Medical specialists detailed the extent of Sophia's injuries with clinical precision that nonetheless left many jurors wiping away tears. Throughout it all, the defendants sat in growing desperation as their fabricated authority was methodically dismantled in the harsh light of judicial scrutiny. I attended when my schedule permitted, sitting silently at the back of the courtroom. The prosecutors needed no assistance. Their case was meticulously constructed and devastatingly thorough. Sophia testified during the 3rd week, her voice steady as she described the confrontation and its aftermath. When asked about the impact on her life, she spoke not of swimming scholarships lost, but of months spent relearning how to stand, how to walk, how to navigate a world now filled with unexpected obstacles. The verdict, when it came, surprised no one. Guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing followed 2 weeks later. Judge Carlton delivered sentences reflecting the organized nature of the crimes and the devastating consequences of their actions. The court sentences Gerald Harmon to 28 years for his role as the primary architect of this criminal enterprise, the judge announced. Louis Mercer to 22 years, Robert Wells to 18 years. The sentences continued for each defendant, all substantial, all commensurate with their criminal actions. As standard procedure in our state, all defendants with sentences exceeding 10 years were designated for processing through Westlake Correctional, my facility, before potential transfer to their permanent institutions. I had made no special requests, pulled no strings. The system simply operated as designed, delivering appropriate consequences for criminal behavior. 6 months after Sophia's injury, she graduated high school from her wheelchair, receiving her diploma to thunderous applause from classmates and teachers who had witnessed her struggle and determination. Though Stanford's swim team was no longer her future, her academic performance had caught the attention of several universities offering academic scholarships instead. She had chosen to pursue legal studies at State University, already focused on a career advocating for victims of fraud and abuse of authority. 3 days after her graduation ceremony, a transport vehicle delivered the first group of sentenced HOA defendants to Westlake Correctional. Standard intake procedures processed them efficiently: medical screening, psychological assessment, security classification. Their property was inventoried, institutional clothing and bedding issued, housing assignments determined based on standard protocols. On their second morning, they were escorted to the orientation session required for all new inmates. I personally conducted these sessions monthly, explaining facility rules, expectations, and available programs. The men filed into the room in standard formation, taking assigned seats under the watchful eyes of correctional officers. I stood at the podium, in full uniform with the warden's insignia clearly visible. One by one, I watched recognition dawn on their faces. Gerald Harmon's eyes widened first, followed by visible shock from the others as they realized exactly whose facility they had entered. To their credit, none spoke out of turn or disrupted the orientation, perhaps already learning the critical difference between real authority and their previous counterfeit version. Westlake Correctional operates on principles of fair and consistent application of rules. I informed them, exactly as I told every incoming group. Actions have consequences. Respect is earned. Your past decisions have placed you here, but your future behavior will determine your daily experience within these walls. I did not single them out. I did not treat them differently than any other inmates. I did not need to. The system itself would hold them accountable without personal vendettas or special targeting. That was the fundamental difference between justice and revenge, a distinction I had maintained throughout my career and would continue to uphold.